Hey everyone, welcome back to OTD History. I want to keep this one short today because there is another live stream later looking at Operation Total Eyes. I'm going to be showing some photos and stuff I took from the battlefield and then talking about it generally and then taking some questions. If you hear any weird dog noises like that one, that's my dog. He wants attention, but he'll probably run away later when he's bored. Hey, he's objecting to my points already. So last night, I don't know. I've gotten some comments again. I've had them before, but I wanted to make kind of a broader point here on videos. Again, I've had another one looking at bias and things of that nature. Calling history is, calling me biased and somehow using that as a bad word. I want to start off the hop that I don't think that's a bad word in history. I think people have this warped perception of what history is supposed to be and how it's supposed to be done. Lots of people think this. People who even work in the field think this, and that's very much within their purview to disagree. I don't think that's a fair assessment. We all have bias in everything we do, where we come from, who we are, what languages we speak, how we grew up, what we consume on a daily basis, and culture. And all of that stuff is clearly a bias. It obviously has lots to do with who we are as people. So to try and set that aside is, I think, misguided. Hold on one second. I give him something to chew. He's misguided in that sense. You can't just set that away all of a sudden. Humans are not robots. You can't expect that. So what I've been seeing lately, and I put this on social media, is people saying, I see this most with certain people on certain videos that I've made or that others have made. Yes, that is Muggins barking in the background there. He hasn't been on a live stream in a while. He is full grown now. For those who haven't seen him in a while, he's full grown pup now. We've had almost a year. And he just turned 1 a month ago today, actually. So not so much a puppy anymore, even though he still acts like one. I see certain people using it as like a bad word to try and, guilt people into not presenting their opinion in certain ways. Certain people want, and this mostly comes to this, World War II stuff that I do, of the German side particularly. I see it in other videos, people going, yay, yay, go you, to other people who, present, certain units like the Waffen-SS and even, Heer units generally, or even all of the Wehrmacht, to be honest, leaving out any of their war crimes or anything they may have been done poorly, or the standard history that we've seen it going on for decades now, 80 years now, pretty much, of they were the greatest thing since sliced bread and the best units of all of history and all of that stuff, and just repeating that without bringing up any of the bad stuff they did. That is like pretty hard to deny that what they did, a lot of them did, was awful. I mean, Phil Blood has really been the one breaking ground in this territory, looking at, beyond the Heer and the SS, looking at the crimes that the Luftwaffe, carried out and things of that nature. So I see that a lot in other YouTube videos, because, again, that's how the algorithm works, right? My channel brings up a lot of that stuff. So it's interesting to see that they think bias, if it goes against what they believe or what they think is the case, they think that's a good thing. But if you say something else, they try to, use bias as a thing to beat you down with. I get certain people saying I'm so biased that I'm spreading disinformation. That was in regards to my questioning of the 12th SS. Effectiveness in battle, basically, which I still believe is they weren't the most effective in Normandy. And other people have been trying to basically get me to stop what I'm doing on here, on social media, because of that. They think I'm making stuff up. They literally use the word disinformation in that regard. Fucking bite your bone, as a bad thing, and they really want me to stop doing what I'm doing. Basically, someone literally left a comment, I think overnight or last night, saying, "Be wary of my channel. I'm too biased. I don't give the 12th SS their due," which it led to the thought of, okay, what is bias, and what does that mean, and why do people get so upset about it, and all of that. To me, it seems people think if you don't go along with the prevailing narrative of a lot of things, that you're presenting, then they say that's a bias, and then that's bad. So, I mean, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's the way to do history. It's just unacceptable in the terms of history. If this was something more, I don't know, innocuous, and I'm not trying to insult anybody, but if this was history over, I don't know, well, paint colors or something, right? People can have very much different opinions on what they mean and how they were developed and what that represents and all of that stuff. But when looking at military history, particularly modern military history, that's still living history, right? Of looking at World War II, there's obviously moral questions here, and that can't be ignored. And to me, that's a big difference here. Is you have people defending these units to me that are indefensible, and people basically praising others who ignore the war crimes or just say, "Oh, there were war crimes," and then go on to present footage of an SS unit with this triumphal music on it and trying to make them look awesome without really getting into it. They think just a mentioning of the war crimes is fine and that's it. And then if you try to bring in any points against even say the battlefield effectiveness, you get jumped on. And this is why I put the SS fanboys in it, because they are very much different than the Wereboos, who are their own set of, I think, very much misguided people. Let's go get it. They have their own misguided things with the Wereboos, but I think the SS fanboys are worse because they want to make these units who they claim didn't commit any war crimes at all, some of them, or they're somehow different than things like the Einsatzgruppen and the camps, which some of the Waffen SS served in both the camps and even in the Einsatzgruppen. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing that, but the death squads that were used in the East. There's overlap. Because the SS was one large organization. So to say that is just historical ignorance, but I think it's also missing the point in a lot of ways. I think we have to have, well, like I said off the top, we have bias, we can't get rid of it. It's not going to go anywhere. But then to say, we should get rid of this bias and, set this aside somehow, which I think is impossible. So people are trying to reach for something that doesn't exist. But in some cases saying, hey, the SS, not good people, or, the Japanese war crimes, or some of even the Allied war crimes are called, carried out. People, say I'm biased and don't say that never happened. I've never made that claim that the Allies never made war crimes, never committed war crimes. I'm not saying that ever happened. What I'm saying is when I ask people for examples, because what I'm getting tired of on history in general is people just accepting the prevailing opinions on things. And then that's it. No one seems to need to present their side anymore, as long as it's the plugins. Come here. He usually won't bark if he's sitting with me. So if as long as they don't, they keep presenting the same narrative over and over again, right? That they don't need to present it in any way, shape, or form. We're supposed to just believe it, or we don't need to explain it at all. It's something I really, really bothers me that when you're trying to go against the narrative, you're taken to be wrong or biased, or you're the wrong one, you're in the wrong. But, the people who present what it's always been presented don't have to back it up in any way, shape, or form. And they try to belittle you. They try to force you off. Right, bud? I know. It's very upsetting. They try to force you off what you're trying to do. Like, people have literally been telling people, don't go to my channel. I don't do anything right. I don't know history. I don't do history properly, which I think is interesting because, as a lot of you know, I'm well educated in the area, and I try to do as much primary research as I can, and that I'm starting to push into German sources as best I can. It's been talked about here and many other channels as well. I mean, we had Niels on last weekend. And there's difficulty with that, right? That sometimes they just don't exist, particularly when it comes to Normandy, because of the nature of the fighting and all of that. A lot of those records are just straight up destroyed when the units get overrun or whatever. So it's a little difficult, but I'm trying to branch out into other languages that I don't know as well. So I'm trying to do my best. I'm trying to cover as many places as possible. Again, I only have limited time because of this guy. We're going to go for a short little one after this. I don't want to say the word because you get upset. But, I try to do my best. So my point overall is, and I want to keep this short, is when someone uses bias, I think they're just trying to get you to stop talking about points they don't like, which is problematic. also, I think they're showing their own bias, which to me is quite funny, because they have their own bias and then they use it as some sort of thing that it's a bad thing when they're clearly displaying their own. So I try to get people to think about that in a way, acknowledge a bias. Yes, we all have it. It's all there. I don't think it's ever going to go away. But then you have the whole moral thing here as well, which can never just be set aside. I don't see how that can ever be done with what was done in the war. This is a war of absolute brutality, both sides, and sometimes it's not even just 1v1 here in this war. Carried out horrible, horrible things. Horrible things were done to humans all across the planet. And it's just not something we can set aside. So to say, we set aside a bias is impossible, but something that shouldn't be done, because then it just allows certain viewpoints to continue on, and people have seemingly no responsibility to, defend those in any way or present them with evidence. It's just, that's the way it is, and you just have to deal with it. That I don't think is right. I'm not saying this is academic history for anyone else is saying that as well, because that's not the case. That's not how academic history is ever done. It's always evidence-based, no matter what you're doing. It's more public history, and this is how people interact with it and what people expect and all of that. And I have experience in both worlds. So trying to just bring that up, make that point kind of clear and how these things tend to go. Yeah, and this is a good point from Andreas. There's no such thing as a clean war. There is no clean war. That's another point I always try to make, is war is just straight up awful. No matter how it's done, where it's done, what time period, it's going to be awful no matter what. So it's best to avoid it at all costs. Not all costs, sorry. That's an immoral absolute. As best as possible is what I should have said. You should avoid it as best as possible. So that's kind of the point I try to make as a military historian. But this goes for any history too, right? You can't get rid of any bias ever. And some of the stuff is, again, more innocuous than others. It's not as high stakes. Some people act like it's high stakes because, people get intense and interested, and that's a good thing as well. But this is a whole other area. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to make overall, is people trying to make it seem like it's a bad thing when I don't think that's the case. You just have to be clear in what you're trying to do with history and how you're trying to do it. To me, that's a big thing. And then people trying to force other people out of the field is something that I don't know that, but that's kind of not how this world works anymore. This is not just a world of this online digital stuff. You can't just ignore that anymore. It doesn't work like that. There are lots of them. I keep blocking people all the time here and other social media platforms. More just keep popping up. They're never going to go anywhere, and it's never trying to change their mind either. It's trying to get others who might not know as much or new to the field, or it's a new interest for them, and then if they're going to see the SS were just normal troops and doing what you need to do, or other people who say that's normal for war to wipe out whole villages for no reason, like that's not how that goes, or that's the way the war was, or both sides were the same, and that's not true. So that's kind of my point, is war is awful, and I agree with Andreas and Pat here on the sidebar, saying that it's never going to go anywhere. I don't think it's going to go anywhere either. I mean, we've gotten somewhat better, but that's, I think, is incrementally better. Wars have never ended. I mean, they're not as constant as they used to be. But yeah, and then sometimes it is necessary. World War II has been called the necessary war because it was. They needed to be stopped. The Germans needed to be stopped. Imperial Japan needed to be stopped. There's no question there. So that's a bias right there. And people are going to say that that's a bad thing to say that out loud. That's my overall point. I don't want to run too much longer, but that's my point overall. So that's something to keep in mind. Something I see in my own work, which I do all different kinds of stuff with, right? I do a lot of public history now, a lot of research even, right? That's something I keep in my mind, even when researching, right? There's bias in the sources as well. People seem to think that that's not something that exists for whatever reason. And this is a bit of a rabbit hole, different topic in a way, but a lot of people don't necessarily know how history gets created. And this is kind of what I want to end on here, is I see a lot of channels do a lot of good work on here. and the way they presented the history and gets people interested. What I don't see a lot of them doing, and I don't really blame them because it's not an easy thing to do, but this is how history should be done no matter what the level or who's doing it, is the primary sources are not really engaged with, right? It's a lot of secondary sources, a lot of things, because it's in a book, is taken as gospel, which is problematic for all kinds of reasons. But a lot of them don't engage with primary sources. And those that do, I don't see them engaging with what that means to engage with them. You know, what are their biases? Why are they writing it this way? When are they writing it? You know, are they writing it as the event just happened? Is this happening that same day? Is this happening 2 weeks later? Is this 6 months later? Is this after the war is over? You know, in the military history context. So it's things like that. And I don't see that happening as much as I'd like. I know it's not easy to do because this is what I am kind of doing for a living. I mean, it's not a best living of all time, but it is what I do on a pretty much daily basis, is this kind of work and engaging with it and what it means, right? I see all the time, well, it's in a book, so therefore it's true, which just boggles my mind that people believe that that is true, or that it's somehow not a bias, which to me is crazy. People don't tend to even engage that way with secondary sources. They just think if it's in a book, therefore it's true. And they don't seem to think that, hey, maybe I should check out the back of the book with the bibliography, which some of the books don't even include anymore, or the notes or anything like that. So that's kind of my thoughts here. So history is not really made the way people think it is done. A lot of people don't engage with primary sources that are making this said history. I mean, there's lots of books out there that are extremely popular that just rely on secondary sources, which is all kinds of other problematic thing. But it's kind of its own biased in that sense, because that's what they use. They think it's right, or, you know, certain authors they always agree with, which is also another problem because they don't really, you know, dig into this stuff enough. So I see that a lot, mostly in the public history sphere. Academics is its own thing, which I don't engage with anymore, really much anymore. It's not a world I'm in anymore. So yeah, so it's something I just want people to always keep in mind. And this isn't something that's going to go away as long as I'm doing this work, for however as long as that may be, short or long. It's something I'm always going to be talking about, is there is always a bias that never goes anywhere. So don't expect that from me, from anyone else. Someone who claims they have no bias is lying to you. They may be trying to set aside the bias, but you can't 100% do that. So if anyone is saying that, they have probably an agenda. Yeah, they probably have their own agenda of why they're saying that, particularly around the topic that may be being discussed. It's just something that I don't think it can be removed. And I think Eric is right here. It's sorry, Eric, right? Yeah, Eric. Everyone has one, and you just have to recognize your own. And exactly, that's how it should be done in books, you know, with introductions and forwards or whatever. Public history should also be done within its best abilities. I know public history is fraught with attention spans being so short, right? That's a problem, right? It's hard to do, but it still should be tried, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. Yeah, I mean, Norma is a classic example, which I hugely respect her in doing. She has her biases, she owns them, and she presents why she has them, which is not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. A lot of us know in this community of ours that Norma's no fan of people like Monty or Guy Simmons or a couple of those commanders. But she owns it. She explains why she thinks so and uses evidence to the best of her ability, because I help her with research, so I know what she's doing. And I know she's digging. That's the important part, is she digs, she looks, she tries to find evidence. She doesn't just read somebody else and, you know, go on and on and on and on. You know, that's not what she does, right? There's a reason why she has them, and that's not a bad thing. It's how it should go. So yeah, it's how, I mean, that's how ideally, if I was in charge of the history world, things would go, right? But it's just not how that works, and I acknowledge that. But that's just my overall point. I want to keep this around the 20-minute mark. So that's what I'm trying to say is there's bias, but be able to present it in a way that you can defend it instead of just putting it on everyone else. Be like, well, this is how it always is. You have to break it. Okay, well, why is this the way it is? Why can't we look at it? Why can't we challenge it? I get in, I get all kinds of nasty comments and get insulted and threatened and all that kind of stuff about, going against the standard narratives that particularly with the German side and even some with the Japanese, people just believe for no reason other than it's in a book. And that's problematic. It's, again, I know not everyone can do primary research. I'm not saying that. I have never said that. I know how difficult it is. I do it. I know how difficult it is for someone like me who's trained in it, who's done it for years. It's still not easy to do. It's still incredibly difficult. You sometimes literally have to go sit in these quiet rooms with these dusty boxes that literally will make you choke from cigarette smoke or smells or dust and all that stuff. And then you just got to dig through this stuff. And a lot of it leads nowhere. So I know that. What I'm trying to say is, like I'm always saying, is think critically, think about it, what you're reading, why is it being done the way it's being done, and don't just take people at their word. People also say that as well. That doesn't work. That's not how history has ever been done. It's not just, it's high, like what I call it, the trust me bro school of history. I can't. That's not how it works. So anyway, that's basically what I wanted to kind of talk about this morning because I took my dog for an early morning walk and this was kind of going through my head. So because of some nasty comments I got last night. So be interested to hear everyone's thoughts in the comments down below. Not in the sidebar down below helps the video be seen by people, shared as well. And I have a show coming up soon, about an hour-ish. Again, looking at Operation Totalize, that'll be a really interesting one. So keep tuned from that. Don't run too far away because I will be back shortly. Just got to do a couple of things before that. So if you can, if you're not, please consider becoming a patron, YouTube channel member. It makes a huge difference. If you're not subscribed, please do that as well. Likes, comments. I keep forgetting to say this stuff, but it's important to help my work reach more people, which I definitely need to keep this going. And super chats. Super chats are extremely helpful. So thank you, Mehdi, so much. Anyway, maybe we can talk about that. I want to do another AMA. I'll keep that in mind, though, Mehdi. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. I think that's a bias. So soon. Interesting point, Pete. I'm going to probably don't go by that because I have a perfect example of that I could probably talk about another time. But I do want to run because I want people to watch this afterwards. But not necessarily. That's not necessarily true. And maybe I can do this later on. But or you can email me or something of why that might not be the case, or leave that comment down below, and then I can respond to it later as well. It's easier to do than just having it in the sidebar. But so long story short, biases exist. They're never going anywhere. Keep that in mind, and don't ever stop thinking about that when looking at history. Right? It's never going away. So anyone who says they have no bias is either ignorant of it or is lying to you. So thanks, Mehdi, for the super chat and everyone else for the support. I'll see everybody real soon for some Operation Totalize talk. So I'm looking forward to that. Bye, everybody.